The plane soared through the inky blackness of the night, cruising at a seemingly endless altitude. Inside, passengers nestled in their seats, unaware of the ominous presence that lurked among them. The air was thick with anticipation. As the red-eye flight cut through the sky, among the passengers was a young mother named Sarah, traveling with her 6-year-old son, Lucas. As the plane headed toward its destination, whispers of unease rippled through the cabin. The flight attendants wore strained smiles, and the flickering cabin lights only added to the mounting tension. But little did the passengers know that their journey would soon become a descent into terror. High above the clouds, a group of terrorists, led by a man named Ivan, had successfully infiltrated the plane. Their objective was simple but horrifying. They aimed to unleash a darkness from within the cargo hold that would bring unimaginable horror to the skies. Ivan was a fanatical leader with a penchant for the occult. He had obtained a mysterious artifact, the blood-red crystal, said to hold the essence of a long-forgotten vampire. The crystal had the power to awaken ancient, malevolent forces, and Ivan intended to use it for his own malevolent purpose. The cabin lights flickered once more as Ivan and his group of terrorists made their way to the cargo hold, their footsteps masked by the hum of the engines. The precious cargo, the blood-red crystal, was hidden within a seemingly innocuous wooden box. As the terrorists chanted a sinister incantation, the box creaked open, and the crimson glow of the crystal spilled into the cargo hold. Unseen to the passengers, a spectral shadow began to take form. A creature born of nightmares emerged from the darkness. It was a vampire, more fearsome and ancient than any legend foretold. In the cabin, the passengers' unease turned to fear as the temperature dropped, and a dark, eerie mist began to seep from the vents. Flight attendants frantically tried to maintain order, but the passengers were already gripped by panic. Lucas clung to his mother, Sarah, his wide eyes filled with terror as the vampire materialized. It set its crimson gaze on the passengers. A low growl emanated from its throat, and its fangs glistened menacingly. Chaos erupted as passengers scrambled for the limited weapons available: forks, knives, anything to defend themselves against the unholy menace. Sarah, desperate to protect her son, grabbed a metal tray and joined the fray. The passengers' collective desperation turned into a relentless battle for survival. The cabin became a war zone, pitting humans against a supernatural predator. In the cargo hold, Ivan and his terrorists, oblivious to the carnage above, attempted to control the vampire, but their chance faltered, and they realized that the unleashed creature was beyond their control. The vampire's malevolence was uncontrollable, and it craved a taste of blood. The battle raged on, with passengers fighting for their lives. The cabin grew dark as the vampire drained the life force from its victims, leaving pale, lifeless bodies in its wake. Its crimson eyes glowed brighter with every drop of blood it consumed. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Sarah and a few survivors managed to corner the vampire. With a last-ditch effort, they lured it into a makeshift cage constructed from oxygen tanks and seatbelts. The creature roared in fury, but it was temporarily contained. In the cargo hold, Ivan and his remaining terrorists realized their folly. They knew they needed to recapture the vampire before it consumed them all. In a desperate attempt to make amends, They initiated a ritual to rebind the vampire to the blood-red crystal. Back in the cabin, Sarah and the survivors held their breath as the crimson glow of the vampire began to recede. Slowly retreating into the blood-red crystal, the creature's power waned, and its monstrous form dissolved. Ivan and his group completed the ritual just in time. The vampire, now in prison once more, was bound to the crystal, with the cabin now eerily quiet. The passengers stared in disbelief at the horror they had endured. The plane continued its journey, descending through the dark, stormy night. The survivors were left with the chilling memory of their ordeal, forever haunted by the knowledge that vampires, once thought to be only the stuff of legend, still existed in the darkest corners of the world. The Crimson Descent had been a journey into the abyss of horror, and the passengers would never forget the terror that unfolded on that fateful flight. After the terror subsided and the plane landed at its destination, the passengers were met by a swarm of law enforcement and emergency personnel. They were shocked and traumatized, and their stories of the vampire in the sky seemed almost too surreal to believe. But the evidence, the lifeless bodies left in the plane's cabin, was undeniable. The survivors were separated for questioning, their accounts of the incident carefully documented. Sarah clung to Lucas, relieved that they had made it through the nightmarish ordeal. The little boy was quieter now, his innocent eyes forever changed by the horrors he had witnessed. The captured terrorists, led by Ivan, were taken into custody and faced a slew of charges. Their sinister plot and the malevolent power they had unleashed would be investigated thoroughly. The blood-red crystal was confiscated as evidence and secured in a heavily guarded vault. The survivors were eventually allowed to reunite with their families, but the trauma of that night would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Support groups were formed to help them cope with the psychological scars left by their encounter with the supernatural. Sarah, driven by a newfound strength and determination, became an advocate for the survivors and the victims' families. She spoke out about the horrors of that flight, urging the world to remember that darkness could exist in the most unexpected places. In the months that followed, the captured vampire remained sealed within the blood-red crystal, a constant reminder of the danger lurking in the world. The artifact was heavily guarded and studied by experts who sought to understand its malevolent power. But the vampire, though trapped, was patient. Its crimson eyes flickered with a malevolent intelligence, and it bided its time, waiting for an opportunity to be unleashed once again. The world would never be entirely safe as long as the blood-red crystal remained a threat. The survivors' lives were forever changed by the events of that crimson night, and as they tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, they remained vigilant, aware that the horror they had encountered could return at any moment. The Crimson Descent had left an indelible mark on their souls, a constant reminder that the world held secrets beyond imagination, lurking in the darkest corners of existence.